In this video, I'm going to go through the journal entries, which is the second part of the requirement in the question Nogood and Company. What I've got here on the right hand side of the screen is a copy of the workings that I did in previous videos. So the material that you're seeing at the moment was from the first video where we figured out corrections that were required for items incorrectly shown in the trial balance. And further down the screen, as you'll see as the video progresses, I've got the same sort of idea for the second video, which was the corrections for the bullet point items. On the left hand side of the screen, I've set out what's known as a journal entry. So you can see the column headings: journal number, account details, debit and credit. And this is basically an accounting instruction setting out what accounts need to have a value placed on the debit side of them and on the credit side. So to get going on this, the first correction that we identified, which is highlighted in yellow, is that we wanted to basically debit the office equipment cost account with a total of €80,000. So if I show that, I'm going to debit office equipment as the account name. The instruction is to debit it with 80,000. That's the two values highlighted in yellow there. And the corresponding entry is in suspense. There was nothing else indicated, so the default must go to suspense. So that's a kind of a learning point there, that when you've done your workings, if there is a balance left over after you do a debit or indeed a credit, the corresponding account needed is the suspense. And I've just a small description there: correction of missed posted balance. It doesn't have to be too exotic or too much of an essay, just to set out the basic idea as to why this particular transaction was posted. So that's that journal entry done for that item. The second one affects the vehicle's aggregate depreciation. And again, this time you can see that what we want to do is shown in the credit side. So I want to credit the vehicle's aggregate depreciation account with the total of those two there. That's going to be 50,800. So credit vehicle's aggregate depreciation account with 50,800. And again, suspense account needs to be therefore debited. Each journal entry, the debits and credits must balance each other out. And continuing at pace, so the next one is the stock account. So what we want to do in this one is we want to debit it with 34,000. So we're going to show that. So stock account, debit with 34,000, and suspense, credit with 34,000. And again, the descriptions are identical in these particular transactions because they were all referring to misposted balances. Cash in hand, we have to debit it with 50 times 2 is 2,500. So cash in hand, 2,500, and suspense, 2,500. So what you should be seeing now is that the workings indicate to you the nature of the debits and credits. And I'll proceed through these fairly quickly. So the bank overdraft, we need to credit it with a total of 2,000. So 2,000, and debit suspense with 2,000. VAT liability, we're going to credit it with 30,000 and debit suspense with 30,000. Now, one thing that would be absolutely fine to do if you so wish is, instead of breaking down each individual correction into its own little journal entry, you could have a very large, lengthy journal entry where you have a debit for office equipment 80,000, and then a credit for aggregate depreciation of 50,800, and a debit for 34,000. And at the very, very end of all those transactions, you could have suspense with whatever the necessary amount is, either debit or credit, depending. Some people do that, and it's absolutely fine. It's maybe a little bit more efficient, but it's absolutely acceptable to do it in the way I'm demonstrating here. So inheritance received, we want to credit that with a total of 6,000. So that's capital introduced, 6,000, and suspense 6,000. And you should get the idea here. Purchase returns, we're going to credit it with 1,200 and debit suspense with 1,200. And finally, storm damage repairs, we want to debit it with a total of 2,500 and credit suspense with 2,500. So pretty straightforward correcting those items. once you have the workings done. I mean, obviously the challenge in these questions is to identify the precise correction required, and that's why I think doing out these ledger accounts can be quite helpful in sort of clarifying your thoughts and ensuring that the logic of what you're doing is sound. So I'm going to go on to the next set of corrections, which referred to the bullet point items. So these were a little bit more complex. So we had identified that we needed to credit sales with 10,000. Okay, in one of the bullet points, the first bullet point item, and therefore we're going to debit Suspense 10,000. Telephone and fax, again you can see that we want to credit it with a total of 800. Okay, so to 800 and debit Suspense. This time the narratives or the descriptions of what we're doing are slightly varied because the transactions themselves are not the same as the first category, all of which were misposted balances. Again, there's no hard and fast rule about the nature of the description, so I've got correction of omitted net sales value. Any variation on that will be fine. Once you're just given a brief description or overview of the nature of the correction that was being made. Motor vehicles cost, credit it with 16,000. Okay, this was the disposal, so these are all quite connected. So we had to get rid of the cost, we had to get rid of the aggregate depreciation, we had to put all these things into the asset disposal account, including the cash received, and we had to fix something in the sales account. Okay, so all those items there from the motor vehicles cost down to sales account, that's reflected in these transactions here. So credit motor vehicles, debit aggregate depreciation, debit disposal, and then 2 credits, and then sales account. We had actually done the cash account correctly in this particular case. We had a correct entry on the debit side, so we don't have to do anything there. We both wanted and we in fact did the debit entry for €500 cash received, so that account doesn't need anything done. I've highlighted that in green rather than yellow. Okay, so the next one was debtors control account, and in this transaction we had to both debit debtors by 13,500 and credit debtors with 13,600. And I noted that you can just credit it with an extra 100, and that's actually the approach I'm taking here. So I've put a credit of €100. Okay, this is 13,500 on the debit side, and this is 13,600 on the credit side. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just going to credit it with basically an extra 100 on the credit side, and the suspense account was needed to counteract that. Drawings, we had to debit that with 12, and the salaries had to be also debited with 12. This was where the owner's drawings were misposted to the credit side of the salaries account, so this is a combination. So there's a debit for 12, another debit for 12, and a credit for 24. And it'd be absolutely fine if you so wish to say debit drawings 12,000, credit suspense 12,000, debit salaries 12,000, credit suspense. If you want to break it up into multiple journal entries, that'd be fine. Okay, and then the last one was the depreciation expense had been omitted, so we need to debit depreciation expense and credit suspense with 23,000. So we've done all the journal entries. So what I'm now going to show is the second part of the requirement, which is basically the suspense account itself. So I've just cleared away all those images, and we're looking at in the top part of the screen we've got the journal entry set out, and at the bottom here we have the suspense. Now, first thing I need to do is put in the open balance, and in the trial balance, the open balance is on the debit side, 65,100. That was highlighted in video 1, and you can refer to the question also to verify that. So the first journal entry is to credit suspense with 80,000. So you just write in journal 1, okay, JNL1, 80,000. So that's that one done. Then I want to debit suspense with 50,800. So journal 2, 50,800. So this is journal 2 and 50,800 on the debit side. So you can see how this instruction works. Okay, so we go down to the next couple here. So that's journal 2. Journal 3, I want to credit suspense with 34. So 34,000. Journal 4, I want to credit Suspense with 2,500. Okay, Journal 5 is debited with 2,000. Okay, so debit with 2,000. Okay, so just continuing down there. Journal 6, we want to debit it with 30,000. And Journal 7, we want to debit it with 6,000. Okay, so debit Suspense, 6,000. Journal 8 is to debit it with 1,200. Okay. And Journal 9 is to credit it with 2,500. Journal 10 is a debit for 10,000. And Journal 11 is another debit for 800. Okay. In Journal 12, there was nothing in the Suspense. Okay, so I'm only looking for references to the Suspense account. So nothing in Journal 12. Journal 13 was a debit for 100. Journal 14 was a credit for 24,000. Journal 15 is another credit for 23,000. And that's it. So when you've entered all those values into the Suspense account, including the opening balance and then all the journals that had an impact on the Suspense account, if you add up each side, they should, and indeed they do, add up to the same amount. And what that tells you is that you've correctly identified all the errors that needed to be made right, and your Suspense account balance will now be eliminated. And that completes your solution.